Welcome to my podcast, Someone You Need to Know, Rob Rose.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for having me.
So, Rob Rose, you are the CEO of Rose Capital Group, a firm focused on impact, equity, and helping communities of color build wealth from the ground up.
That's it.
How long have you been in this business of development real estate? Let's jump right in and talk about
Yeah,
it.
so it's been about 20 years now since I've been in the field in various roles. So started after business school. Really, my education started after business school because prior to business school, I actually was an engineer working out of Texas. I went to business school and came out and started working for GE Capital in their commercial real estate group. And then from there, GE Capital led me to Urban Partnership Bank here in Chicago, Chicago Community Loan Fund, Cook County Land Bank, and now Rose Capital.
And that's why I said I got to have you back because your name has been mentioned at least twice in the recent reboot of my podcast, because you're doing such great work as you're known as a change maker for addressing the racial wealth gap through real estate. What sparked your interest and passion for community development and finance?
All right. Well, so I saw the podcast. I appreciate the mention. So before I forget, shout out to J.R. Fleming. Shout out to
Bonita Harrison.
yeah. I saw that. And some of your other guests you have on Dr. Mullins, who we just talked about, was on the show. Also Anthony Simpkins. Um, well, what sparked my interest here was during my time at GE. One of the things about GE is that they really stress systems, right? So it wasn't so much, it's not the result is the results that you get stem from the strength of the system that you employ. And that really stuck with me. So at GE, we were all required to go through a green belt training, right? Six Sigma training. And from that, you understand the importance of setting up these systems. So when I looked at what was happening in our communities, the inequities that we saw, it really is the result of a system, right? So there are these different laws and processes in place that are designed to keep us where we are and designed to perpetuate the conditions that we see. So for me, it was what can I do to help to fight these systems, right? So when we talk about the racial wealth gap, we're talking about a series of denial of to different systems. And so for me, Rose Capital was about addressing those systems, right? So it's access to information, access to capital, and access to opportunity. Those are the three systems that I see that we've been denied access to that really do hamper our abilities to gain wealth in our communities. And so, if you look at my career in different stages, I was addressing one or two of those systems, but never all three. And that's part of what happens is it's very difficult to get all three done because each one requires a focus, right? If you're talking about access to capital, you've got an entire industry. That's the CDFI industry that's really trying to address the access to capital. Access to information, you've got everything from the TikTok content providers down to universities and everything in between trying to get to the information or the education piece. The access to opportunities actually is where I like to focus my energies on because that's the one that's least understood, right? So this is a situation where you have all the information, you have some capital behind you, but how do you buy a house if that house is not available for sale? How do you buy it when it's tax encumbered? How do you buy it when you're not aware that it's even available? So if you're not able to even get into the game from the opportunity standpoint, the education and the capital don't matter as much because you still don't get a chance to deploy. And so it's really focusing on those three systems and doing things I can do to help to shortcut those. That's really was the impetus behind my being in this industry, but then me forming Rose Capital.
And that's what I was about to ask. That leads perfectly to my next question. Of you having some top roles at um, the Cook County Land Bank and to Chicago Community Loan Fund, what made you step away to start Rose Capital Group? And I guess the direct question is it easier to help developers by doing your own thing independently from these top organizations that you
Well, certainly, there's less restrictions on what you can do and how you can help, right? At the land bank is a county agency, so there's certain things you just couldn't do. There's certain ways that you could not communicate, and certain processes you had to follow because it is a county agency. The Chicago Community Loan Fund, there was a little more freedom, but again, their focus really is on access to capital. So if you're talking about something beyond capital, it becomes a little more difficult to be able to impact that because you have a primary mission to the shareholders and to the investors of the loan fund and to the community to be able to provide that capital. So, part of it is that Rose Capital does give me a lot more freedom to choose the projects that I want to work on, but also to help out in a way that I can customize for the clients that I'm working for. So not every client is created equal, and they don't all need the same things. I'm able to flex and provide the needed services. So the flexibility is absolutely part of me forming Rose Capital.
that is I want to stay there for a second, right? Because you supported over 650 community developers, many are black and brown.
Right.
You're just getting started. From your perspective, what can black leaders do to mentor, encourage, guide the next generation of aspiring developers, planners, community leaders who need that direction?
Right. So the access to opportunity is really where I think the biggest bang for the buck, right? And especially in Chicago, where we have such an influential political class. This is where I encourage our politicians and policymakers and leaders to really focus on. So when I say access to opportunity, if you think about how wealth has been built in this country, especially in Chicago, it's been in cooperation or through their work with units of government, whether it's contracts out with the airport when the airport was built, when they were expanding the highway and being able to get those contracts, all the buildings that you have to do, right? The hospitals, the universities, and all those opportunities provided fodder for people to actually make money, right? And for them to actually build wealth. Oftentimes, we're just excluded from that process. We don't get a chance to bid. We don't get a chance to be a part of that. So, if I'm talking to our politicians, I'm saying you've got to keep fighting to make sure we get a chance to have to have a seat at the table. At the land bank when I first got there, we had a 4.5 page application, and it was very sort of what you would expect to see. It's sort of what the city still has when you go to fill out the end of the grant applications. They ask you a whole lot of questions about you and this whole thing. And it's not that that information isn't necessary. It's just that there's a way for us to screen and get to the information that we need when we need it, right? And so taking that application and shortening it down from the 4.5 pages down to about 20 questions, yes, no questions. Now it made it more inviting for people just to see if they wanted to be a part. And a lot of it was that we don't want to intimidate people in working with these systems, right? So we want to find a way to make it inviting. That doesn't mean you have to sacrifice the quality of the person or lower the standard, but when you're staring at something that's an intimidating document in the beginning, it has a chilling effect of making you not want to participate, right? And so, again, as leaders, part of our job is to make sure that we can be as inclusive as we can in terms of making that information and that process easier to do. And that's where leadership and representation matters because the easiest thing in the world to do is to hide behind jargon and to hide behind process, right? It really takes courage to step out and say, look, here's how we're going to be more inclusive, right? We're going to get these things, but I don't need to have your history just to allow you to look at a property, right? Once we award the property, once we decide to do something, then I can dig into your financials. We can dig into your plans. We can start to talk about the things that are necessary. But for a screening, I don't need to do all that. So it's just that sort of level of understanding that we have to have in our politicians. We have to push to say, look, let's make sure we get people in the game. Let's make sure we have the opportunities available to them because they're capable and they're ready to go. Increasingly, we're working on the capital issue. Increasingly, we're working on the education issue. We've got to also now work on the opportunities so they have the opportunity to get into the game in the same way that everyone else has been able to participate.
What are you doing to assist and guide potential aspiring developers to navigate this process and understand the application and education and what it really takes to be successful in this space?
Sure. So the most recent thing, and I think the most impactful thing that I've been doing is I partner with the City of Chicago Department of Housing and with the Chicago Community Loan Fund to offer a 2-day workshop called Financial Readiness for developers. And really, it's about making sure that people are prepared financially and understand the challenges it's going to take to be able to be a developer. So we all have our different lanes. I talked about, access to education and capital and opportunity. For me, a lot of the content providers that are out there, Dr. Mullins and um, um, uh, uh, Dewan Robinson and Sean Jones. These are great guys, and they're helping you on the construction development side, helping you to understand how to design these things, how to work through the city process for your permitting and things. And that's very important. I think it's as important that we also help them on the financial readiness side. So it's not just that, hey, I have an investor and they want to put money in, but what type of investment do you want to take on? And what does that mean? And how are you able to get these projects done from A to B? And so for me, being able to partner with the city and offer this workshop free of charge, if you will, to people to be able to come in to get this information, understanding that it's not going to be 100%, right? That's not the goal. The goal is to make the information available. So for those that want to take it, they can take it and move on and be ready for the next stage. But that's probably the biggest platform that I have to impact the largest number of people, and it's been a tremendous response. Right now, we've been sold out. And right now, we have a series of workshops we're going to be scheduling for the fall, and we already got a wait list for those classes. So that's the single most impactful thing I've been able to do. With the different developers that I'm working with, it's a full conversation that we're having around what's needed. And even the most seasoned developers still could use that perspective, that sort of outside eye to say, hey, thank you for identifying that, or thank you for helping me think through that, or just thank you for being a sounding board so that I can talk through these processes. So, for me, it's being able to offer that perspective from the experiences that I've had to be able to bring that to bear on these different projects.
So basically, you're booked and busy, and your former job won't let you go because they want you coming back to continue to provide the education. You just glossed over. It's like, yeah, I have a partnership with the city of Chicago, community loan.
Yeah,
That's
well,
okay.
part of it, right? Part of it was as they were looking to be impactful with their rebuild program, they saw that there was this gap there, and that was part of the conversation to say, "Hey, you were there at the beginning of the rebuild program. You work for the land bank. You work for us. From your perspective, what do you see as a missing piece of that, and can you help us out?" So that's how that engagement came along. So I was fortunate that because of the perspective that I have. I was able to put all that together to say, hey, here's what I see is missing. And this really resonated.
Is it when you say what's missing, what are you finding? Is it that I guess you may have addressed it, that is it a hesitancy that they see the application and they just, don't want to deal with it and don't understand it, so they walk away from doing this development or using these specific programs?
Both, right? I mean, so specifically, when you're looking at either a program like Shy Block Builder or working with the land bank or these things, people look at the application, they get intimidated. They stop at just being able to create a submittable, account. They create the account and they go through and they look at the questions and the eyes sort of glaze over in terms of how they answer those questions. So part of it is just demystifying, like, here's what the application is asking. Here's the information you need to gather beforehand so you can go step by step to answer these questions, right? And so it would, in the workshop, I equated to cooking a big meal. You just don't jump right in and start cooking. You look at the recipe, you get the ingredients, you map it out, you plan out what you're gonna do. So then when you start cooking, you're ready. You don't have to get ready. You already are ready so that you're able to go ahead and do the meal. And we have to approach a lot of these applications in the same way. We have to understand what's necessary, gather that information. If you don't have it, take the time to get it so that when you sit down to walk through these things, it becomes pretty straightforward to be able to put forth the story. You have to know what you're trying to say. You have to know what you're trying to do. A lot of times that reflection is part of what you have to go through in order to put forth, good applications. And even if it's not an application, as you think through your project, one of the things we talk about with developers, right, is if you're an aspiring developer, you should have a 3 and a 5 year plan for how you're going to grow your business. And if you can't articulate that, you really need to stop because what are you striving toward? If you're in a mode where you're just doing project to project to project and you're just taking it as it comes along because this was cheap or I can do this, you're on a hamster wheel. You're not able to grow a business. So let's take a step back and say, what is it that I'm trying to do? Strategically, how am I trying to get there? And it helps to guide your next step, your next project, the next opportunity you're going to look at.
Let's stay on that topic for a sec, because this is something that me and Johnny Mullins talked about in terms of aspiring developers who, think things happen just because of prayer and osmosis and not having logic behind it. A lot of aspiring developers, I hear a lot of just random of how they're going to do it. Are you able to say, give me an ABC 1, 2, 3? Is it you need money? Is it you need credit? Say you don't have the money, but you have the credit, or you need assets? Like, what would be the ABCD, as an aspiring developer looking to get in this, develop? You really want to develop. I know you said one of the things is having a plan, right? But
Hmm.
him talked about even a dollar figure. And I was like, you say you have $10,000. Well, what are you going to do with that? What can you really do
Right,
with that to be a developer? What
right,
is
right.
your give me a 1, 2, 3 ABC of, like, as an aspiring developer, I should have perfect credit, $100,000 in the bank, or take all the classes.
Right, right. Well, so one, you've got to have a plan. Two, you got to have access to capital. So that doesn't necessarily mean you have the money. Having good credit helps. Having your own savings helps, or being able to partner with people that have that. You have to have access to it. So that's a broad sort of category. And I'm cheating a little bit, but that means different things to different people. Some folks have 401ks that they could tap. Some people have life insurances they can tap. So there's different ways to get to the capital, but you've got to have it, right? And the third thing is that you have to have a team, right? We think of this as an individual sport. You have to have a team. Right now, if there's a project that came across your desk and you don't have a GC you can call that you trust, you don't have an attorney you call that you trust, that will have your back, that will be working on your behalf. If you don't have at least those two things right now, the third would be a good architect. But if you don't have those at least those two things, you shouldn't be doing any projects, right? You should, and if you don't have that, that's your next step is to assemble that team to do that, because you can win the lottery tomorrow, have all the money you need, but without the plan, without the team, it still falls apart. You need all three things. These things have to work in concert. And so oftentimes what happens with folks, especially new folks, they hear that TikTok says just jump in and do it. This is easy, blah, 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 right? They get in, they don't have the right team. So the contractor takes them for all they got. They don't have the right attorney, so they're not properly protected in their contracts and also in how they are working on their projects, right? They over improve. They can't, get to the sales price they need because they've done too much and they can't recoup that money. It has a chilling effect on their ability to carry forth. Now, you talked to Benita earlier, and she talked about all the pitfalls she ran through, right? Then, if you're going to do it that way, then you've got to have the resolve. You've got to learn from it, and you've got to get back and do it again. But you still have to have access to those things to make it work. I would say the fourth thing, if you will, the intangible, is an understanding about whether or not this is for you, right? Real estate is one of those areas that everyone thinks that they can do it. Just because I can put a ball through a hoop doesn't mean I can be a professional baller, right? That I can do this for a living, right? And so it's the same thing with real estate. Just because you like to go on MLS and you like to look at properties, you like to go to open houses, doesn't make you a real estate professional. It could be a hobby, it could be something that you do on the side, but not as a profession. So you also have to take stock of yourself to say, am I really built for this? Do I have the risk tolerance for this? Do I have the patience for this? Can I put together the team to make this happen? So there has to be some assessment that has to go on as well.
So you're saying dig with deep into yourself to understand that you need to be able to put a team together and not just make it a hobby and
That's exactly right.
not just want to
One of the first questions I asked, right, when we do the introductions in my courses, why do you want to be a developer? You've got to be able to really answer that question for real. Like, it can't just be about making money because there's a lot of ways to make money, right? And it can't just be, hey, I want to change my community. I get that. There's a lot of ways to change your community. But why do you want to do it through real estate? What is your vision for it? And to the extent that you can really articulate that, that's what you lean on as you go through this process to be able to get your projects off the ground.
You've launched some really impressive programs like Home Buyer Direct program and Neighborhood Investor Lending program. Which of the initiatives are you most proud of that's had impacts on families and communities?
So I'm proud of all of them because the programs really, people say innovative, and I think that's such an overused word. It's really about problem solving, right? There's an issue, we're trying to solve it. So for the Home Buyer Direct program, the problem that we had at the land bank, we were getting a bunch of properties in that there was not enough spread to be attractive to developers. There were good houses. They didn't need a lot of rehab. And after the rehab was done, the developers weren't able to really recoup the investment for the time and energy they put into it, right? So these houses sat a bit, and we were like, what's going on with this house? This house seems to be in good shape. It wasn't distressed enough. What we realized was, hold on, if we could sell these directly to homeowners, that small spread becomes their equity, right? And whereas a developer may not be interested in a $10,000, $15,000 profit, for a developer, that's 10, 15,000 worth of equity that they gain as soon as they get the house. And so it was really about solving that problem and understanding how we can impact people, and then putting a system around that to really drive that home. So as soon as we created that program, we saw all of these homeowners that were there, that had pent up demand. They wanted to be in these neighborhoods. They wanted to be able to own these homes. And that was the creation of that program. And then since my exit, the land bank has gone one step further and now offer some down payment assistance to further help with that. So now you're solving a problem. It's not the cure all, right? But it is a weapon in the quiver of the toolbox, if you will, for people to be able to work through that issue. With the neighborhood investor lending program, that came about because we had developers that were buying houses that were creating rental spaces. They were cash flowing like crazy, right? Because renting and buying, you could rent at a higher level, um, but the value wasn't there, right? And so, but when we're lending the money, it's like, we don't lend on value, we lend on cash flow. And so by being able to do that, we say, look, if it cash flows sufficiently, then the value doesn't matter as much. And then, we're able to hit a higher number of folks that are coming in that are able to buy in these neighborhoods that have a strong rental market, right? Um, and lend a product that can come in to make a difference there. So in both cases, it was about finding solutions that would help people in these neighborhoods access the capital they needed to get to what they need to go to. And the only thing that was holding them back was that the capital sources they were going to had these preconceived notions about value or about the spread and that not being large enough. And us taking the time to say, you know what, we think we can craft a solution here that really, real work. And so for me, those solutions, those innovative solutions are really about solving a problem that help to address that access to capital, access to opportunity, that I talked about before.
As we see rising costs in the housing market and these words of affordable housing, equitable development, How is that sustainable? How is that sustainable for emerging developers who want to do affordable housing and also equitable development? What tools are available for them right now to sustain and scale?
Yeah. So the short answer, right, is that we're going to have units of government that are going to have to take a more proactive role in that. Right now the cost is spiraling out of control, right? Um, and we don't have any mechanisms in place. In fact, the current administration is taking steps to increase those costs, right? Well, you have the same ability to decrease costs through different policies, right? So, tax credit programs have been an attempt to do that in the past. But tax credit programs, again, are a tool, it's not the tool, right? So we've got to find ways to be able to work down and get to the systems that are causing this disparity, right? So one of these systems is our supply chain. I mean, all of the materials, the costs just keep going up and up and up. And so, how do you build things so that you can combat that? Well, one, you've got to have some larger economies of scale to be able to purchase these materials at higher bulk, right? And so, whether you have some sort of um, cooperative that's formed that is able to buy the materials at a certain price and at a certain scale and be able to pass it on to their members, or if you have units of government that put together this sort of using their buying power to buy things down. Somebody has to be able to go out and buy it in sufficient bulk to be able to cause the price of this to lower, because retail prices are insane, right? So if you look at your big development houses, this is what they're able to do, right? They have sufficient scale to do that, where they can go off and they can guarantee prices because they're going out and they're buying this stuff in bulk and being able to warehouse it and that whole thing. Well, we've got to find some mechanism to be able to do that, to control, some of these prices. Now, what the local governments have done pretty well is figured out how to write down and lower the cost of land. So between what the land bank is doing, what the city is doing with Child Block Builder, what some of the suburban communities are doing around tax recapture of properties, they have been able to figure that out, right? How to get the price of the land down. So that's good. And then the other thing is that we've got to have the financing mechanisms out there to allow people to buy these houses. And so again, we have FHA and we have these different tools that are out there, but there's still a bit of a bias in here. We're still heavily reliant on credit scores. We're still very heavily reliant on, I can look at certain zip codes and, be predictive around who's getting approved and who's not getting approved. So we have that bias in the system. So, I mean, so really, we've got to really address these systems, and it's going to take some courage, and it's going to take um, um, forward-thinking folks to address that. Right now there is a state commission and national commission looking at appraisal bias, because that's real, and it has the same sort of effect where I find a house in a neighborhood, but I can't get it to appraise to the level that it will get financed or to that pricing. Neither the person has to bring that price of the house down, or I have to forego it and go get something else because I can't afford it. Um, all of these different systems that we have are legacy systems that were built on a faulty foundation. And at some point, we've got to wipe that foundation and start anew if we really want to see a change in how things are done in this country.
Thanks for tuning in to Someone You Need to Know. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the podcast on all major platforms and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Rashanah B, for more inspiring stories. Until next time, keep shining, keep building, and keep making the world a better place, one story at a time.